Welcome, everyone, to Leadership in Quarters podcast, the interview series where leaders come to share their perspectives on different leadership topics. I'm Josh Seldin, and today's guest is Greg Provance. Greg Provance has served drinks at dive bars and cocktails at the Oscars, cooked short order, and hosted celebrity events for Janet Jackson, Madonna, and Tom Cruise. He's seen every corner of this industry, and he's turned that experience into a mission, helping restaurant owners build teams and operations that actually scale. As founder of GP Hospitality Partners, Greg works with multi-unit operators across the country to fix the people problems that kill growth: turnover, weak leadership, and cultures that don't stick. His new book, Loyal AF: How to Build a Ride or Die Team That Grows Sales, Wows Guests, and Never Leaves, is the playbook. His Ride or Die Leadership Circle is where operators put it into practice. He's also the author of Butts and Seats, lives in San Marcos, California, and is on a personal mission to make the restaurant industry a place where great people actually want to stay. So, welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Josh. I so appreciate being here, man.
I'm so excited to have you here, and definitely a very impressive background that you got there.
I think it sounds a lot more glamorous than it really is, to be honest.
I think it's super cool. I love the names of your books that you've got there. So that already is a plus. And I'd love to jump into our topic to give everybody an idea. It's how to create leaders and not babysitters. And
Yes.
I'm very excited to jump in. So if you could, in your opinion, what do you see is the difference between what we consider a leader and somebody who tries to be a leader but is actually just a babysitter of their team?
Yeah, look, I think it's funny because that word leadership can be such a broad thing. It's so subjective depending on where you're at and what lens you're looking through. But I think a lot of times we find ourselves in that position. And I say we because I've found myself in this position before too, where we end up wondering, okay, why is it that I've told them 1,000 times to do this and I still can't get the result I'm looking for? They just don't listen, or I just can't get them to understand. I've showed them the tools and I've given them everything they need. And so what ends up happening is we have this feeling created like we're just chasing rabbits around and we're just trying to babysit people. And I've found that it's not usually because we don't care so much. It's just because we don't really have the system and understanding of how to get the best out of those people necessarily and really grow people. I've always said a leader's job is not to get followers, it's their job to create more leaders.
Right.
So I think if we're seeing things through that lens, that puts us in a coaching and nurturing mentality. It puts our interest in making someone who is under our employ or somebody that reports to us better.
Mhm.
And I've heard it said before, grow the people, grow the business.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people would agree with this. Probably most of your listeners, probably many people out there was like, yes, that sounds right. But the gap is that we don't often experience that.
Mhm.
And so that's why I've become so passionate about this work. That's why I've written this book around this conversation, because I've unwittingly, unknowingly, over the years of just grinding it out in restaurants and opening my own businesses and helping others, entrepreneurs, to succeed. I've built this process that works. I've tried it in my own restaurants and my own businesses. We still keep it first and foremost in anything that we touch today, and it actually works. And so that's a long way around your question, but leaders, babysitters, people don't just usually wake up one day and be like, I want to babysit a bunch of
Yeah.
people. It just happens. And if we find ourselves in that rut, and it's hard to get out of when you can't see the writing on the jar when you're inside the jar. You know what I mean?
And it's so difficult to get out of because, in my mind, you have to be intentional. And the babysitting part or the assumption that it's somebody else's problem comes natural all the time. So it's so easy to see a situation, like you said, where, I've told them this a million times, they just won't do it. I stop there and go, it's their fault. And I don't stop there and go, what else could I have done or what did I do to create this disconnect? But it takes effort to stop and reflect and think. And I have to be intentional to do that. Where normally what people do is they just go, oh, it's Greg and Josh's fault. I told them and they didn't listen. So it's them.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Reframing, big
Yeah.
deal. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I feel like a lot of leaders have great intention. And a lot of the other episodes we have, I'm a very big fan of intent versus impact. But with this, a lot of leaders may have the right intention to be intentional about making sure they do ask that why. They do try to understand why they've created an organization of people who wait to be told what to do, that they're babysitting, as opposed to having that ownership. What are some of those leadership traits or behaviors that you see that leaders may default to or naturally have that create the babysitting mentality or the mentality of a team where they sit and they wait for instructions instead of taking ownership on their own to run with their ownership area.
Yeah, I think that's such a good question because I feel like that's really the crux of getting out of this jam. Because again, so many of us have found ourselves in that position. We just can't figure out why isn't this working? I feel like I've done all the right things, like you said. And so I think that I'll give you an example. So in the restaurants, if I have 10 different locations, let's say, and I've got store leaders in each of those locations, I've got to understand that they're managing the business in my absence. I've got to know when I'm not there that things are getting done. And hopefully they're getting done and decisions are being made as closely as I would make them.
Yeah.
And that's always the challenge. We find that it's easy enough for me to go in and look at sales for the day, look at labor costs for the day, look at all those metrics that are those mission critical things that are going to let me know that things are going well. So what generally happens is I'll look at those and then I might call up store number three and be like, hey, Joe, why is the labor so high today? And then Joe's, oh, blah, 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 this and that. And now we've got an energy flow where I'm hunting for information and
Mhm.
Joe's just trying to make me happy and get me off my back. He's going to tell me whatever I need to hear to get me out of this conversation. So that's the cycle. What we really need to do is change that flow of energy. We need to
Mhm.
shift the energy from them to take more ownership and be bringing us solutions. And so, what that takes is this idea that we need to start to empower them to make those decisions. Number one, we can't be afraid that they're going to make the wrong decision and the place is going to burn down. We've got to give them that space to learn that. And then we'll have them report on these items. We'll have them report on things that we need to know that are mission critical. So I know they're watching them. So now the energy's flowing in a different way. They're
Mhm.
coming to me and they're saying, hey, Greg, labor costs a little high today. I just want to let you know we had three people training and two people called out, and that's why.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, great. Now I know you've got it. Same exact situation,
Yeah.
same result, way different conversation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it makes me think of two different things. One is that whole proactive versus reactive thought process that you build in the teams where they don't wait for you to call. They'll
Mhm.
instead call you and tell you. But I think it really reinforces the fact that you need leaders in these types of situations. Yes, both the ones that are the owners or the leaders of the restaurants or the stores, but also the overall leader, the you in this case, where you're open minded and you're there to help and you're a safe place where this person doesn't feel afraid or unsafe calling you and saying, hey, my labor costs are high. Because in a lot of places, they'll say, Greg, my labor costs are high. And then you end the conversation right there and tear them a new one because their labor costs are high. We don't understand why. And then you don't open it up to where it could be, Greg, I'm really running into these things. I could really use your help. We never get to that point because we just stop and choose somebody's butt off instead of really understanding. And I think that's so critical for somebody to innate, as you empower and enable that thought process to make sure that's healthy.
100%. This whole conversation we're having, I think, is predicated on the fact that we, as leaders ourselves, always need to look in the mirror. We need
Yep.
to be the ones to keep ourselves in check and hold ourselves accountable to that standard. 100%. Absolutely.
And I think when we are there to offer help, we actually offer help. And I laugh because I've told people before the amount of times people have said, Josh, what can I do to help? And I say, oh, this would really help. This is what we're running into. And then it's just crickets. Nothing happens. And then that will also stifle the reaching out because why am I going to reach out to Josh or Greg? Because they're not going to do anything. Or I'm going to tell them where we're at and nothing's going to happen. I'm only going to
Yeah.
hear from them when bad things happen.
You know what? That's a really good point. And I find that a lot of times, especially in the restaurant industry, restaurant owners and operators usually have a pretty strong work ethic. They're doers. They just jump in and get stuff done because it needs to get done. I think the problem comes sometimes when we, in our effort to help or to be helpful or to think we're solving a problem, we jump in and we
Mhm.
just do things and we get it done rather than taking the time to step back and say, hey, how would you do this? Show me how this should look because when you're in fight or flight and tickets are flying, that's not a comfortable place to be. But we got to get comfortable with that, being in that zone more often.
Yeah, because it really erodes the trust when you tell somebody you are in charge of this restaurant. Yeah, I own everything overall, but you are in charge of this place. And then as soon as I say that, I now push you out of the way and do the work myself because it's why the heck did you put me here in the first place? And it just slowly erodes anything that you may have built with this person.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And if you're anybody like me, if that was done to me, that would quickly erode. Actually,
Yeah,
I'd just recoil.
exactly. I'm the same way. And I love what you brought up because it makes me think, especially in the restaurant industry. So I'm in the manufacturing industry, and already my thought process, a lot of our thought processes we never really have downtime to do things like train or build capability or show people how to go do things because things are always go. I would
Mhm.
imagine it's nothing like the restaurant industry, which there you are always go. Customers are always coming in. And how do you take these, I'd say, micro coaching sessions where you can build capability and build ownership in people when you're in an environment like yours and a little like
Yeah.
mine, where there really is no time to just pause and say, I'm going to sit with this person for an hour and train them. It is, I need to do this on the go and make this effective, efficient, and stick.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, especially in our industry. It really does require a lot of those micro moment trainings. And it's like we have to adopt this mindset of, again, our job is to create more ownership minded individuals on our team. It's like a sports team. We want to stack the team with people that have an ownership mentality. And the only way we can do that is to impart that experience on them as we go, and especially in the moment. And so, yeah, there are definitely moments in the restaurants where we're just running and gunning. We're going. There literally is not a moment to stop. However, there are lots and lots of pockets of moments that are available. I find that oftentimes the first moment we get as a leader to duck into the office and get something done, or to just get off the floor and take a break, or do something else, because it's not just about serving guests. There's so many other things that need to happen on the back end. We say to ourselves, I'll get to that later, or I'll talk to that person later, I'll have that conversation later, or I'll tell them what I noticed tomorrow. And then that never happens. That's the trap. So we've got to get really good at, as soon as you see something, just take that just one split second moment to pull them aside and say, hey, let me show you. Did you see that? Did you see that? Did you notice that too? Yes. Okay. Then this next time, let's try it this way. Or more importantly, get curious and ask them, hey, what are you seeing? How would you solve this problem? Show me, and role play in that way. And I'll tell you, the we're too busy thing is a bunch of BS, because yes, we have a lot of busy moments, but we
Yeah.
have a lot of not so busy moments too, if we're honest.
I love the word that you used, curiosity. And that's really where we need to ask those questions, especially in these coaching moments, is ask them with curiosity. Because a lot of times, especially when you have experience in whatever industry you're in, I'm going to ask you questions, and maybe they're leading questions where I want you to go with my answer. But there are many different paths to get to the same endpoint. If I'm going to go visit you in California, I've got many different roads I can take to get there. I don't need to take Greg's road. I'm going to take Josh's road. And asking questions with curiosity, asking those open-ended questions and seeing how they would solve it could be a game changer in any industry.
Oh, 100%, man. And by the way, any road you take, you're always welcome to visit. So doors open, just letting you know.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's a really good point, because I always tell people your biggest tool, especially for young leaders that are coming up, that are trying to get this thing and trying to understand how they can be more effective, the number one tool in your tool belt is curiosity. If you can take that thing you're about to tell them and turn it into a question, you've just done something. You've shifted that energy again. You've done
Mhm.
something to empower that person to start thinking for themselves and start coming with solutions. The
Right.
more that we can do that, and we can get some reps in on that one, it completely changes how people respond. And so you ask, how do we get from that babysitter to leader? That's one of the biggest tools that we can deploy to make that happen. And it's simple. It just takes some practice.
It's again that intentionality to make sure that you ask those open questions. And to your point before, yes, things are busy a lot all the time, but there are pockets where it's not. And those pockets are where you can stop and ask those questions because you don't need your answer so quick that you can't allow somebody to come up with their own.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because in our industry, the one thing that we used to do a lot back in the day was have pre-shift meetings. You'd
Mhm.
have the team come in and you'd have a pre-shift and you'd go over the night and all the specials and do all the stuff and rah, rah, rah. You don't see it as much anymore because of
Hmm.
labor concerns, and everybody's coming in at different times. And we use this excuse that they're all coming in different times and they're not all going to be there and all these things. I call BS on it. I say, no, this is your golden moment to
Right.
get, even if it's just a handful of people and you rotate them every day, that's your golden moment to impart, your values and have conversations, thoughtful conversations about what's important to your business, which really all go back to your mission and your values and all those types of
Mhm.
things. We need to be having those conversations with our teams way more often than we are. And those are the golden moments to do it.
Yeah, communication is so important regardless of what industry you're in. And if you don't have those moments, you either don't do it at all, which sadly I think is what happens most of the time. Or I can just imagine a restaurant and the person running the restaurant's running over to each individual person, communicating the same thing over and over again because, hey, let's go skip this morning meeting or this whatever you want to call it that I've got 60% of the people there. It's a heck of a
Yeah.
lot easier to communicate to 60% and then catch the other 40 either through them or through yourself than just going, well, it's not worth it.
Yeah, it's easier and it also creates alignment because when we're all in it together and we're sharing in that energy, it has a way of galvanizing a team.
Mhm.
And so that piece is that subtext that doesn't get talked about a lot, but that's really important. Bringing people together in a unified conversation is very powerful.
Definitely. And once you do all this, we've talked about a lot of great things that help strengthen this culture, strengthen alignment, and put this ownership on the other people. What signs do you generally see after you've done all this that shows psychologically they have taken ownership of their area as opposed to just having Greg's checklist that I'm just going to make sure because Greg said this is important, I'm going to go over these things and I'm going to do it because that's what Greg wants, not because I am now the owner and I know I need to do this because this is my job.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's many different ways. First of all, I talk a lot about energy. The energy will shift. You will definitely feel something different in the air. The comments that you're hearing from your team will start to show up. Oh, wow, really appreciated that talk. Or, hey, thank you for this. Those kinds of things are evidence, I would say, of these things. But honestly, when this is done well, it shows up in guest feedback. You're going to see much better returns on your reviews. You're going to see, believe it or not, it shows up in your profitability because the more aligned your team is and the more efficient we are in that way, then everything else becomes efficient. We're going to get more out of our people. They're not going to be as checked out and on their phone in the corner over here and this and that. These are all telltale signs that things are not aligned. And when we start to have more people that have that ownership mentality and they're truly leading, everything just seems to get easier.
Mhm.
Shifts run smoother and guests are happier and team members turn over less. And that's a huge cost savings to the business. I work with a team right now, of about 9 locations, and they were fortunate enough, they secret shoppers in
Cool.
their
Yeah.
organization. So for the first 3 months we were working with them, we were able to track their guest reviews across all platforms. So we were able to raise their star status about a half a star across all platforms, which is pretty significant for
Wow.
9 locations. Their shopper reviews and reports went from an average of about 83% to an average of 92%, which is a market improvement across every location.
Wow.
And team satisfaction scores basically soared. They were so appreciative that they were getting that level of support. And so I share that to say that these things are not just stuff. There is a real financial impact to the business when these things happen. I'm sure you know this from your days in manufacturing. You can probably easily track efficiencies and mistakes and waste and all that kind of stuff attributed to these things.
Yeah, it's again a change in mindset where in the past, I think people used to think of this as the nice to have, fluffy, feel good stuff, and they never really saw the output of what this gives. And I'm with you. I am the first one not to say that I don't believe in sick time. If you're sick, especially I got to imagine in restaurant industry, you don't want people there because it'll just spread. But
That's right.
when you have ownership and when you care and when your culture is healthy, people take sick time less. People are less likely to call out when they're not actually sick because they feel that ownership and they actually want to come to work.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
So, like you said,
Absolutely.
you'll see it everywhere. And yeah, there are some things that aren't metric based because you keep using the word energy and you can feel the energy and you can feel that shift, but there are metrics as well. And your example at the very beginning of this episode with the profitability, hey, my labor costs are high because I had 3 people training and 2 people called in. When you do this work we're talking about, you may not have those 2 people call in anymore. And there you go, right there. You're saving on labor costs.
Yes, absolutely. We've definitely seen that in the data. And it's fun when it shows up on the energy side too, man. It's
Yeah.
just more enjoyable to be at work.
It is. And people are, I feel bad saying this though, so blind to things that aren't metric based. And I get it because even in our industry, we're like, let the data tell the story. Don't use your feelings because a lot of times our feelings can stray us in the wrong direction depending on how impactful the situation is. But there
Yep.
are times when you do want to go on feelings, you do want to go on energy. And I always liken it to the phrase of, hey, I can cut the tension with a knife when I walk into a room.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. There are these non-metric based feelings that you can have that give you an idea of what your culture is and how your people feel in your organization that you may not be able to put a number against.
And that ultimately becomes probably the biggest attractant, right, for your brand. Because when people feel good at work, they feel that energy. Yes, they want to be there more, they want to stay more, they want to call out less, but they're also going to invite their great friends to come and work there. And so, this whole idea of good help is hard to find. We can eradicate that if we just create a place that people really want to be. And
Mm.
we're attracting that talent rather than just trying to go out there and fish for them.
Exactly. And as you're building all of these, especially because it's not like this is a light switch. So it does take effort, it does take time. And generally, we
Oh, yeah.
come into an organization, unless you're building something from the ground up, where you have a culture and a system that already exists that you're now going to try to improve on. So you've done all this work and you get into a situation where we are coaching people, we're trying to create this ownership. How do you handle things like mistakes? How does a leader in this kind of situation take mistakes? Because, like you said, when people are checked out, when they're not fully there, they're burnt out, they may make mistakes. How do people
Mm.
then take that as a learning opportunity to build ownership as opposed to, oh my gosh, I did this, Greg's going to kill me, and I'm going to be his least favorite employee now, and I'm just going to now do whatever he says to make sure I don't screw up again, as opposed to keeping this ownership on myself and learning from it?
Yeah, look, I think number one, it starts with what you had suggested, being self-aware and
Hmm.
self-reflecting. We have to be the type of leader that makes it okay for people to come to us when a mistake is made, because then we can solve the problem. We've got to create that space for them. We just have to. And then the other piece is just there's a mistake and then there's patterns. Mistakes happen and things happen, but if we're doing our job as leaders and we're addressing it and we're coaching them through it and we're coming up co-creating solutions, not just me telling you what to do and you respond, but we're collaborating together as a team, then you will ultimately create that environment and make it safe for people. And they're going to test the water, especially new employees. They're going to test to see, okay, how far can I go? Oh, yeah, they say this is an inclusive environment. They say this is an open door policy, but is it really? Because I've heard that before. So, to your point, we have to be consistent with that. And we just keep creating that space for people to make it okay to come with solutions to the mistake. Hey, if you have a mistake, you own it, but that's okay. Let's work through it together. I had a boss a while earlier in my career. I was the GM of this place and I reported directly to the owner. And I remember feeling that way at one point. I was like, oh man, I really screwed up with this. And it was totally my fault. I was taking responsibility and all this. And I remember going to her with this. And her response was, hey man, we take these together. It's fine. This is
Wow.
what we're going to do. Let's figure it out. And that was a game changer for me. Just that simple response, because I was expecting like, oh man, but she was just like, no, we're going to solve this together. And just simply doing that just opens that door wide open.
And I think it gets back to what you talked about in the beginning also is this why. It is so easy when somebody comes to you with a mistake to be like, oh man, Josh, you suck. How could you do that? I can't believe you did that. And the solution is don't do it again. The solution is I'm just going to reinforce the output that I want and make sure you do that next time. And you don't ask the why, because the why could be I didn't train somebody properly, or because rather than drive my labor costs up, I didn't have extra people come in. I tried to run short staffed, and there's all these different reasons. And so I agree with you. A mistake should be learned from. Now, if it's a trend and it's the same reason that mistakes being happening over and over again, that's a different problem. But as long as we're not creating the same mistake for the same reason over again, that means we have a learning process, and that will drive that ownership of the person, as long as the leader is like your old boss that has that open-minded, let's figure this out together, let's understand the why, and let's fix it. So we're actually fixing the root cause and not something that I'm just looking at on the surface.
Yeah, very well said. 100% agree with that. Yeah, anytime someone says something to the effect of, why would you do that? That's like a knife to the heart to somebody. It's
Yes.
like super shaming. So you got to be really careful. And again, intentions aren't always, I've worked with a lot of leaders that are looking be like, what? I didn't mean that. Well,
Right.
I know, but you have to understand how that comes across. So again, that self-awareness and how we're positioning some of these words is incredibly important. We need to know how that lands.
It goes back to that phrase of people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you make them feel. And that's
Right?
exactly what this is. And I don't think people will walk away from this conversation saying there should never be accountability. Of course, there should be accountability, but it's seeking to understand the reason behind things before you get to that accountability side. Because in my experience, yeah, there have been people that have come through my organizations over the years that we have had to separate with because of accountability issues. But there have been a heck of a lot of issues that we've had that were because of leadership, because of unclear expectations, unclear standards, unclear training, unclear blah, 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 blah. And
Yep.
if we didn't have this open mind to seek to understand, it's just so much easier to fly off the handle and get rid of somebody or blame somebody instead of figuring that
Mhm.
out. But then you never fix it. And then the next group of people that come in, your next set of new hires will run into it all over again.
Absolutely. Look, accountability, I think, is a byproduct of this stuff. It's so much
Mhm.
easier to hold people accountable when you have that environment. Otherwise, it
Exactly.
becomes a beatdown and the
Yeah.
revolving door continues.
Yeah. And then that just kills that psychological safety and that trust and everything else that we've built this whole conversation on.
Yeah.
Not having that right approach will destroy anything that you're trying to build and crack the foundation.
Yeah. 100%.
Greg, this has been a great conversation that we've had. Is there anything that you want to share with the group? Any final parting words before we go?
Yeah, I think I want to just reiterate that idea of curiosity. I think if there's any young leaders out there that are considering applying any of this, I'm hoping there are, just use that tool of curiosity. It's going to open up so much and just reframe things in a way that's super, super powerful. And you know what? Just be cool to everybody, man. Be nice. Can I say don't be a dick? Don't be a
Yeah, go
dick.
right ahead. Yeah, don't be a dick. It's true. Yeah. There are plenty of them out in the world. We don't need any more. But it's true. Be authentic, be yourself, be a good person. Nobody shows up to work wanting to do a bad job. I've met people who have shown up to work and done a bad job because of different reasons, but nobody gets out of bed and goes, man, I'm going to screw over the company today.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. I love that. So I want to remind everybody this was Greg Provance. Please check out his books, Loyal AF, How to Build a Ride or Die Team That Grows Sales, Wows Guests, and Never Leaves, and the book, Butts and Seats. I'm sure you'll get a lot more out of that in addition to everything that you heard today. You can like, follow, and subscribe to the podcast found on all podcast platforms, my Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Leading Quarters. You can email me with any questions that you have for myself or for Greg. I can get you all in touch if you'd like, or any ideas you may have, or if you're interested in being a guest in future episodes at leadingquarters@gmail.com. All of Greg's information will be in the body of the podcast episode on the YouTube page and in the postings that we have. And for whatever reason, if you can't get a hold of him, let me know. I'll get you two in touch. But I'm sure you'll have a lot of passion to reach out to Greg after this because between the topics that you have, and I'm sure the stories that you have, and some of the ones that you've shared here already, there's a lot left to learn from you. So I definitely appreciate it. It's interesting because I've made this point in other episodes before where a lot of the topics that we talk go across different fields and across different industries. And you are a great example of one of those where you and I have two starkly different industries that we're a part of, yet the core foundation of leadership and the culture building is the same. So I really appreciate you, one, coming here and sharing what you have today, but really reinforcing that fact that it doesn't really matter who's listening here. If you're trying to be a leader, you can be it regardless of what industry you're in.
Yeah, that's 100% universal principles for sure. And Josh, thanks again for the convo, man. I know we could do this for hours. We'll catch
Good.
up on the back end and continue for sure.
Definitely. Greg, I appreciate everything. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.